Hi everyone, and you are welcome to Introduction to Class Diagram lecture. In real projects, you could have hundreds of classes in addition to the relationship between them. Therefore, in order to document this software architecture, you need a visual diagram. Why I say the visual diagram? Because simply, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So what's the diagram to be used in case of classes? And how to draw this diagram? This is what we will learn about in this lecture. In this lecture, mainly we will talk about the class diagram. Therefore, we will understand first what class diagram is. Next, we will see how to represent a class, access modifiers, and classes relationship inside this class diagram. Also, I'll share with you some recommended software in order to draw such a diagram. And at the end, I'll end up this lecture by a quick summary. So let's get started. So, what's a class diagram? Simply, this diagram is just a visualization method for the classes in your application. In addition to the importance of this diagram in context of documentation, also, it's very useful in the planning phase, especially in the large-scale projects. Why I say that? Because this diagram will help you to imagine and understand what you are going to implement exactly before you spend tons of time in the actual implementation. Also, this diagram is very useful for communication between team members because when we draw a diagram, we draw our ideas in a way that the other team members understand. And this is quite useful to make sure that you communicate effectively without any errors in understanding. In order to draw this diagram, there is a language called Unified Modeling Language. And in this language, there are specific symbols for classes and relationship between classes. And this is what we will talk about in the next slides. The key component in the class diagram is the class itself. So how to represent this class inside the class diagram is quite simple. All what we have to do is just drawing a box like this. The first part of this box is the class name. Then we list the attributes. And finally, we list the class methods in this box. For your info, the colors in this diagram is just for the explanation purpose, and they are not standard. The next thing that you need to represent in your class actually the access modifiers for both attributes and methods. In this context, if you want to represent public, private, and protected, we have to mention these symbols beside the attribute name or the method name. And you will see here that I'm using plus, and plus means this is a public, whether an attribute or a method. Minus mean it's private, and finally sharp mean it's protected. So we can understand from this diagram that account holder name, for example, it's a public attribute, withdraw, it's a public method, account ID is a private attribute, and balance is a protected attribute. Alright, so we have understood how we can represent a complete class with its attribute, methods, and the access modifiers. Now let's talk about the relationships between classes. So, to represent this relationship, actually, we are using different types of arrows. And what you have to be careful from for different type of relationships is what the arrow type is and what its direction. We know that we have two types of relationship, which are inheritance and association. And under association, we have composition and aggregation. We know that under inheritance, we have multiple types of inheritance relationship, but at the end, all of them will use the same symbol. So let's see together now. In the previous lecture, you have seen symbols like this. And these symbols are not arbitrary symbols. These symbols come from the UML language, and you will see that the first arrow represents inheritance relationship, the second arrow with the diamond represents composition relationship, where the last arrow represents the aggregation relationship, and as you see here, it's just a dark diamond. Now let's see these arrows in action. So, if you have inheritance relationship, usually you will draw the arrow in this way and in this direction, which means it's a normal arrow pointing to the parent class. Now, in case of composition, we draw the arrow with the diamond in the head in this way, and it points from component class to the composite class. And in case of aggregation, we will do the same thing exactly, but the type of the arrow is different, which is a dark diamond. Now let's see a real example about this relationship. So for example, in context of inheritance, let's say you have a bank account, and in this bank account class, and there are two classes inherit this class, which are current account and saving account. Another example about association, let's say we have a bank and there is a composition relationship with the bank ATM and there is aggregation relationship with the class client. Now I can say that I mentioned all the details that you should know about a class diagram. So we know how we can represent a class, attributes, methods, and the access modifier. Also, we see how to represent the relationships. Now, in order to draw this class diagram using the computer, you can use some software. And the recommended software is, the first one, it's Draw.io, and it's open source and free software. Or you can use another one, which is commercial one, which means you have to pay if you want to use, which is Lucidchart. That's all for this lecture. Now let's recap what we have learned. First of all, class diagram has been defined, and we say that it's just a visualization method for the classes in your application, and we say it's quite useful for documentation and for effective communication between team members. Also, I show you a complete example about how to draw class diagram. We see that we represent the class by using a box, and this box has 3 sections, which are class, attributes, and methods. We use symbols like plus, minus, and hash to represent different access modifier. And we use 3 types of arrow, which are the normal arrow for inheritance, an arrow with a diamond in the head to represent composition, and a row with dark diamond on the head to represent the aggregation relationship. Thank you so much for your time, and if you are available, join me in the next lecture.